Welcome everyone to another edition of Pulp Nonfiction. Today I have with me Marc Schouten and Chris George of Broad Reach
Strategic Planning.
There we go. Yeah. This is the third part of a three-part review of different things. The first one we talked about the finances and how the COVID impacts us. I spoke with just you, Marc, on that one as well as on the insurance one. And this time we decided to bring in some intelligence feedback from Chris.
And sorry, I'm the best to get.
There you go. And Marc's a fellow teammate on Better Outcomes. And Chris is an avid supporter. So the ride has been postponed, the 2020 ride, because of the COVID. But the fight against cancer never ends. And I think this is a good opportunity for you to, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then Marc, you can recap about yourself as well. Sure. And then we'll get rolling into the most interesting or very interesting part of it, what the government plans are and the programs out there to help dentists and small businesses in this pandemic.
Great. Well, thank you, Joel. Yeah, my name is Chris George. I'm the co-founder of Broad Reach Strategic Planning, along with Marc Schouten. I'm a certified financial planner. I've been doing this over 12 years, and we specialize in working with dentists. In particular, my focus, I love to focus on the tax side of things. I love to focus on the financial planning, the insurance strategies, tying it all together. I really, really enjoy that. I'd also mention that I've been doing this for 12 years. Marc and I go back over 30 years. So you get to work with one of your best friends and you're both equally passionate about what you do. It's a lot of fun to work together.
Yeah, no, it's you guys were Playchecks in Alberta, but Broad Reach in BC.
Well, Playchecks in Alberta, I have an identical twin brother who was with that one, but we wanted and needed to branch out with our own company here because we work with so many dentists in BC.
Perfect. And then Marc, recap of...
So I sort of introduced myself in the first couple parts of this. I'm obviously a partner with Chris in Broad Reach Strategic Planning. My primary focus is on financial planning and direct financial planning with clients. And it's an area where we've launched Broad Reach specifically to address the market that we have here. I find BC is probably a little bit different than Alberta, and we do work with a lot of millennial dentists and people starting out, as well as more recent practice owners. It's a brand really suited toward the dental demographic in particular.
Yes, we may have a coast, but we only have one NHL team and one CFL team. So take out of that what you will. So this is a very Canadian biased presentation because we're basically talking about our wonderful chaps in Ottawa and the great things they have in store for us.
But although in the States, as I understand, the stimulus checks are going out to deceased people and the families get to claim it. So, there's wins on both sides of the border, I guess.
Yes. No, absolutely. So the first area of interest is CEBA. Is that right?
CEBA. Yeah, Marc, do you want to jump into the presentation?
Yeah, you know what? I'll pull up. Why don't I pull up the? We put some stuff that the areas. I mean, honestly, it's great to have an interview. There's so much detail in this stuff. I had a few things as for compliance and things I've got to throw in, and I just wanted to make sure there was some stuff on the screen.
See, the irony, our tagline is advanced strategies made simple, but this is changing on a daily basis. So quite literally, in one day to the next, programs are announced, programs are changed, programs are amalgamated. It's just we're trying to stay on top of quicksand.
Might I suggest you just change the tagline, advanced strategies made today.
This is what we know so far. It's and with any of these things, as Chris is saying, we're sitting was it April 19th on Sunday, and we're sort of talking about what we know up to this point, and then even some of the stuff we're talking about isn't actually specifically written out yet. Thankfully, as of last weekend, we had legislation around the wage subsidy, which was the part that had the biggest, the most questions. But before any of these things, I think that our goal for the discussion really is also to make it clear that before you make any decisions, especially around wage subsidy, and just make sure that you're really clear of the implications. But there are also some positives to it. So, and
Okay, so let's dive into it.
I did have a, sorry, my screen's not advancing. There we go. One of my favorite Ronald Reagan quotes, and boy, this could not be more apt for the situation we're in today. It's the idea with the clientele that we work with, you know, we do very little in the way of looking at what government benefits are available, because in general for our clients, government benefits aren't available. You know, we might have a little bit of CPP and retirement funding, and that's probably about all there is. So yeah, we're, you know, Chris is watching the daily pronouncement from the cottage in Ottawa, you know, and we're trying to sort of stay ahead of things, but there's a lot of complexity in general. Where we talked about how these things are all changing, one option for a good source for information, on our website we have a COVID news section, which is actually being updated regularly. So when there's a new program, or if there are things that are kind of relevant that we feel should be that would be good to look at. And this is also stuff where if there's stuff that comes up which looks good, Joel will send you links and say, okay, here's a good article on this, or here's some additional information on that. If there are people that have questions, thankfully there are some really good groups out there putting together information.
There's also more to it than just the government programs on the site. There's in BC, we have the Fortis BC deferment programs for other things other than government benefits. There's also more information on mortgage deferrals, etc. So if you want a good place to check out not just government options, but what are your options, what's potentially available for everybody, you can just go to our website, www.brsp.ca.
Okay. All right. Onwards and upwards.
Yeah.
So this is what I wanted to jump in, because this is where we get the most questions, and this is where we saw a lot of the biggest urgency. It was on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, otherwise known as CERB. There's going to be so many acronyms thrown at you. I apologize in advance that we stumble over them, but there's about 5 or 6 different acronyms that are being thrown out there right now. The biggest worry that Canadians had in general was, I'm not getting any money in. I need money to live on, and so the government needed to get money out the door as quickly as possible. A lot of people were on EI before, but now this program was not just for people on EI, it was for people who couldn't necessarily traditionally qualify, such as self-employed people. So now it's for everybody can apply. There's restrictions I'll get into, but what I mean is you have the ability to apply. It's an automatic approval process of $2,000 per month, and they have the dates listed out also depending on the year or the month that you're born in, what day of the week you can apply for. All of this, by the way, is through the My CRA website. I strongly encourage everybody to make sure you go to the Canada Revenue Agency website, make sure it's a government organization. When I first looked up CRA login, I found a very colorful screen that had lots of good give us your information links, but nothing actually from the government of Canada. So be aware that there are people out there trying to get your social insurance numbers as well as your birth dates, etc. Make sure it's a Canada website first. But from there, it's $2,000 a month for up to 4 months. And I would also mention this is not just for dentists, but if the dentist's spouse. For example, my wife was a teacher. She is now having to stay at home because they've shut down all the schools. So she's eligible for that $2,000 a month. It is not a household drop in income. It's a per taxpayer over the age of 15 who earned more than $5,000 last year in Canada, which is another issue for some dentists and for a lot of self-employed people. But what you receive is if you're on EI, so if you have staff that are on EI, you could get up to $573 per week, and this is $500 per week. So some people would have less than $2,000 a month, some people have more than $2,000 a month. But for those people who are taking essentially a pay cut from the EI to the CERB, it will actually extend their EI. So they're not really going to lose anything. They're getting a lower amount for this time period, but then the EI will pick up and continue on as normal. So what was question though is what happens to people who have got staff maybe come in 1 day a week? For example, like I need to have somebody coming in, or there's the social workers or the care home workers who aren't working that many hours, but the qualifications where you couldn't have earned any money. So now they've changed it as of April 15th. to allow for people working fewer than 10 hours per week or earning, I should say, under $1,000 per month are eligible to apply for the CERB benefit as well. So as of this date, we've had over 7.5 million Canadians. So just imagine the workforce. There's 36 million in Canada. I think there's about 18 million, maybe 15 million employed people. We're looking at 7.5 million of the eligible workforce have claimed this. So it's a huge number of claims that are being processed. And to give the government credit, it was processed fairly quickly. My wife was paid out within 3 to 5 business days for the CERB benefits. So that's wonderful. But what I want to also stress, though, is that if you're wondering if you should qualify or not, I don't know, should I get this? What happens if I claim it and then it turns out I'm not eligible? If you need the money, I would say to go ahead and apply, but understand that next year, the Canada Revenue Agency will look to assess all these payments and may demand money back if they feel you didn't qualify. Currently, we're not seeing any penalties or interest having been announced. There are for other programs, not this one. This one seems to be more on an honor system. And so we'll see. I'm not suggesting to do it just because you want the money, but if you truly feel you need the money and you don't know, then I'd look to apply for it. It will be automatically approved, and then next year you have to reconcile with the Canada Revenue Agency.
Yeah. So we jumped into the CERB instead of the SEBA. Is that right?
We're coming up to that because
my first question was about SEBA, and we jumped to the CERB, right? So we're talking about CERB, and we'll get to SEBA later. Remember, you said we'll talk about SEBA first, then CERB. So this is all about CERB right now.
Sorry, that was so we were thinking CERB, and this is the thing with all these acronyms. It's so easy to miss here one versus the other. And yeah, our thought was, well, the CERB really it's sort of the most universal. It's also the first one that they actually brought into practice.
Okay. Well, fair enough. So the CERB, I've been advised not to bother with it because I'm working a little bit. And so don't bother with it. So I think if you're a dentist and you're working a little bit, you're best
right. This is if you really need the money. If you're unemployed, you have massive debts, you have massive. I'm only strictly talking about if you have a real need for the money and you don't have access and you're not working. I don't mean that's what I was saying. This is not for everybody to apply. Yeah. It's for those who truly need the money. But if you're really that rock bottom right now and you're wondering, well, I don't think I qualify or not, then I'd say if you need the money, you need the money. Right. But just be aware that you'll be reconciled next year.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's great. Any other things you'd like to add to the CERB info there, Marc?
So yeah, on the CERB side,
correct all of Chris's mistakes.
No, I mean, so no, it's totally valid. I mean, the thing is, there are certain things as we go through the other ones, it'll also become clear that for some people, the CERB is going to be the only option. And if that was the case, let's say you're a recent grad, you haven't incorporated yet, or you've only ever paid yourself with dividends, CERB might be the only option. Whereas where you own a clinic and if you've had T4 income in the past, you have payroll, it makes sense, assuming that you aren't really, as Chris says, stuck really need the cash flow right now to pay really urgent bills. It does make sense to take some time and say, okay, is this going to be the right thing, or should I be looking at the wage subsidy, for example? And we'll jump a little bit further into that.
All right. And can you be on EI and collect CERB?
No.
One or the other.
We're getting into that.
It is one or the other, and it actually it's defaulting to CERB now. And so, like for staff, let's say that are laid off, they're falling under the CERB benefit, and then so that has a cap of $500 a week. But if this continues beyond the CERB stops and they stay on EI, it's extended their EI. That's not that much further. It's a $73 a week difference for maximum EI versus the CERB benefit.
Yeah, we're getting into that discussion.
More people up than pulled down.
Yeah, we're going to get into that debate. Which one or the other coming up in 1 or 2 slides.
Okay, so would you like me to ask about the wage subsidy next or SEBA?
SEBA would probably make sense because that's the second one which is actually available now.
Okay. So, hey guys, how about SEBA?
I'm glad you
We do
asked,
so many
Joel.
presentations. It's so hard to be in an interview format. I know
This
we're
is
not
so
good at it.
organic.
Yeah.
They won't see through us.
Well, since you asked.
Yeah. So
Interesting you should mention that.
Yeah, funny.
This was one, believe it or not, this is actually fairly simple, which is a nice thing about this. There were tweaks made to it, but overall the program is fairly uncomplicated. It's a Canadian Emergency Business Assistance, so CEBA. It's available through the bank, and then one of the changes was now they made it through your credit union. So wherever your corporate bank account is domiciled, and it has to be, and it shouldn't necessarily be a problem, but it has to be on or before March 1st of 2020 that you had a corporate bank account. Of course, if you're incorporated, one of the first things you do is open up a corporate bank account. Shouldn't be a problem, but just be aware that's one of the issues. You can provide a government guaranteed bank loan. So the banks will advance you up to $40,000 for small businesses that is backed by the government, that is interest free until the end of December 31st, 2022. If repayment has been made in full by the end of December 31st, 2022, the government will look to waive up to $10,000 would be waived for repayment. So 25% of what you borrowed. So if you borrowed $10,000, you'd have $2,500 waived. So 25% would be waived if the full repayment is done by the end of December 31st, 2022. Another change is that it used to be you have to have a federal tax registration. That's key as well. But also that you had in payroll originally between $50,000 and $1 million. And they just changed it just even, was it 3 days ago, to now make it lowered it to 20,000 of payroll and 1.5 million of payroll. And we had a lot of people asking, so why 1.5 million if they're making that much money? That's a difference between I have a lot of staff or I have a lot of expenses. You can have payroll paid at 1.5 million and not clear any profit. That's not really an issue for a lot of people in terms of if they have high costs as well. The funds can only be used, this is the really key part, it can only be used to pay non-deferrable expenses. So your rent or other things that you couldn't defer to pay later in the year. So going to conferences, maybe you could defer that to another year. Certainly not. We've had this as well, that people were asking, well, what if I put X amount of dollars onto a credit card I owe interest on, I'll put the other amount into some guaranteed investment, and then I'll just simply sit on the money for a couple of years. It will be tracked. You have to document what did you spend the money on, and if it's to the inappropriate use of the money, the government will come knocking for sure.
So you can't spend 8.6 renovating your house on Sussex Drive.
No. I mean, I can argue. You might want to argue that you get a
weekend,
$20,000 for a really nice hot tub to relax your muscles to enable you to work better. I don't think that'll qualify, but give it a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it is very easy to apply for. You can even apply for it online. I noticed when I go to my corporate accounts at a certain bank, it's right there. I just can click on a button. I can apply for it right there. Of course, you can't go in person. You can also call your banks, but that's the easiest way to do that. It's pretty much instant approval as well, as long as you meet those qualifications. Keep in mind, you're going to be audited on this. The government will keep track of, were you eligible for this, and what did you use the money for, and when did you pay it back?
Yeah, I just filled it out a couple days ago. It pretty much asked one financial question, like what was your wages or billings or something last year, and then your corporate number, and that was pretty much it. I was expecting some government form where they were just go on and on and on. I was like, that's it? And then I've heard from other people that the money has come in, so this appears to be working rather well.
So you've got a good amount of money for that new mountain bike or new bike for the Better Outcomes 2 ride next year, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Carbon fiber,
electronic shifting.
Yeah.
So that's the one that will be very popular. I think they had 250,000 or so across Canada had applied already. I'm trying to remember the exact number, but a substantial number of businesses have already applied for it. There's not a like a limit on this in terms of there's a pool of funds. It's if you need it, you can apply for it, and there's no where you're going to run out. We're going to get into this. A lot of these programs, by the way, they overlap. So we're going to, your question on the SUS or the CERB, also on the business available, there's a lot of things where you're going to see overlap and where you could use the money, what it's intended for, exactly right. So bear with us as we go forward to the next one, which Marc will talk about.
One thing I would say with the SEBA though is, if you have a small business, I mean, obviously dentists are listening to this, I would apply for it because there's 99% chance, we don't know how long this is going to go on for. Even if your legitimate costs are low monthly, you're going to creep towards that because we've no idea how long this puck's going to be iced, like kicking it down or shooting it down to the other end of the rink. And so I would tend to say that when it comes to being audited, 99% of dentists will be able to show enough of legitimate expenses.
And honestly, if you think you're going to be using it, apply for the full amount. Don't say I'll take a little bit now. And it's about, we don't know. Maybe they shut down the program next month. Maybe they increase. We simply don't know. If you have 40,000 for your expenses for the year, then take the full 40,000.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. No. I grab it. I think you'll need it. It's a little.
One thing that jumped out at me about this one was this line at the very bottom.
Oh yes. Yes.
That the borrower agrees to participate in post-funding surveys conducted by the Government of Canada or any of its agents. This is going to be a bigger discussion after the SUS part as well. But there's certain things in here where we're seeing stuff that this is, I can tell you if you look at the CPA boards or you look at like where people are discussing this from the accounting side, there's some things here where people have said, especially from the accounting world, that's weird. Like that's kind of a strange thing. I haven't really seen that before, or that doesn't sound normal. There is something happening on the background of this where, say, well, post-funding surveys, this might just be, this is how we're going to make sure, this is how we're going to, instead of doing an official audit, we're going to use a survey to find out what you use the money for. That would be certainly justifiable. But we do, we sort of see a few things where we're kind of questioning whether maybe some things could be politicized. So it's just something to sort of keep in mind that you are agreeing to. I don't see this as it certainly doesn't stop me.
But it is unique and it is, gives pause for thought.
Well, we got something else coming up that gives us a bigger pause, but we'll get into that in a second.
So what I suggest, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. So, and as Chris says, like, this is, all of these things kind of line up with each other and one thing precludes this and stuff. I'm finding that the last part of this where you'd asked about was on the wage subsidy is sort of where it kind of ties some things together or gives a little bit of guidance around maybe how we should be thinking about going forward.
And now we're moving on to SUS. And we're not talking about a bunch of ladies in Winnipeg. We're talking about CEWS, right? Wage subsidies.
Yep.
Okay.
Wage subsidy.
There we go. Okay. So sue me.
Somebody needs to go and dump.
You never realize you're being interviewed by Michael Scott fan, right?
This is it actually would be fun to have a soundboard and be able to throw sounds in.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the most complex out of the three.
This is hands down the most complex. This is the one where, so it's Saturday the 19th. They actually recalled Parliament and they passed this last weekend on Saturday. So this has been in place. We've had the legislation for about a week. Like everything else, stuff has changed in between. There have been adjustments and like not necessarily adjustments to the actual legislation, but they've made new announcements from the morning pronouncements and things. So some changes here and there, but in general, we're starting to get some clarity around it. It is the most complicated part, but there are actually some upsides for us on it too. So the whole purpose of it really was, I think they looked at the other jurisdictions where they have European countries that had done 80-90% wage subsidies, basically just said, okay, if you're paying wages, we're gonna help support that and make sure we're not laying people off and paying them through the other side. this is March 15th. We got kicked out of the office and had to go home because we were at PDC and had been exposed. And they said, okay, mandatory quarantine at that point. So Chris and I both were in a meeting, both watching the news conference, and said, oh, okay, well, I guess we're going home and quarantining now. That's over a month ago. This has taken a long time to come to fruition. It started with a 10% wage subsidy, which everybody said so no relevance essentially. This is now a real program. Now it really does make sense to consider. It makes a difference over the CERB benefit. There are some specifics, but it's something to consider.
Yeah, my accountant mentioned that CERB was not a good idea for me because I work 1 day a week now, and this is much better idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. So eligible groups, a little bit like what Chris was saying about the $40,000 loan. This does require you to have had a payroll program or have a PR code in your CRA business account. So again, if you are an incorporated dentist, but you've only ever taken dividends, you've never been an employee of your corporation and taken T4 income, you would not be eligible. So you would need to be an incorporated business. It's also applicable for partnerships if you paid salaries through the partnership. And I know in the dental business, we do have some partnerships. There is a revenue test, but I'll explain why it's for the dental business is a little bit less concerning. We're hoping by late April, late this month, early May, to have the portal built, and that you'd be able to apply. The application won't be like CERB, which is essentially just apply and you get it, good faith, or the one where you go through your bank and get the loan. This is going to be a bit more detailed, but it is also a larger benefit. And they're saying that the actual payment, that they're going to process them very quickly once they have the portal open. So they've targeted like a week or so for money to actually come through. Mm-hmm. The thing that caused a lot of sort of questions or made it a little bit complicated to start was this period 1, 2, 3 thing. So we have these periods, March 15th to April 11th. Now we're in this period 2, April 12th to May 9th. And then the third period. The thing to be aware of is that as part of this legislation, when they had this passed, this can actually be extended all the way to the end of September without having to recall Parliament, without having to get any approval from, because we do have a minority government, not you'd think that, but it is a minority government, but they would actually not need to get anything approved to extend this all the way through to September. Mm-hmm. The qualification really is you have to have paid your employee for 15 consecutive days within any of these 3 periods for them to be eligible for the wage subsidy within that period. That's the most important part. We still have time in period 2 if you wanted to rehire an employee, let's say, where they could be paid within period 2. A lot of the complexity, and honestly, probably 40 to 50% of the back and forth about this when talking to accountants and looking at what the accountants are sort of picking apart about this has been to do with eligibility. Positive, it goes to show you the impact on the dentistry business in that it's not really a big concern because generally revenue has gone down. I mean, it only has to have gone down 15% in period 1. If it went down 15% in period 1, either for the matching month last year or for the average of January and February, let's say if you only incorporated partway through the year, you only had to have a 15% decline and then you automatically qualify for the other 2 periods. Everybody that I'm working with, they're either 90% decline or 100%. Most of them are 100%, right? Most have been totally closed. So qualification on the revenue side won't be a concern. And that's where a lot of the details, so if you do look at some of the further reading materials that we have, where it seems overwhelming, a lot of that is to do with qualification. Unfortunately, it's so badly impacted in the dental business that it's not really a concern. You definitely qualify on the revenue side. The maximum is $847 per employee. So where we're comparing this to that CERB benefit, obviously $847 is a significantly higher per week than the $500 per week of the CERB benefit. What's interesting is that if you put employees on paid leave, and this includes, you are also an employee of your corporation, if you're not able to do any work, then they will also top up 100% of your EI and CPP, or the Quebec equivalents. One of the things that Chris and I both find really sort of concerning about this is that we have these general statements that aren't that aren't really specific. It says employers are expected to make their best effort to top up salaries to the pre-crisis level. To my mind, if we're talking about what metric you would use to judge that, I would generally say, well, if you've lost 100% of your revenue, your best effort your best effort doesn't make too much difference. It's, we don't have any revenue, we can't top up the other side of it. So to my mind, it would be perfectly fair. How that's going to be taken by the CRA, or taken by, an auditor coming in and saying, well, we saw this much in retained earnings, you could have afforded to do this, or what have you. I don't really know, and when there isn't any clarity around that, we just sort of have to see how that goes. You can hire new employees, but it is pretty important to make sure that you're hiring arm's length employees. So if they're non-arm's length, so if they're related to you, for example, or related to a shareholder, a major shareholder of the company, they would have to have been on payroll before March 15th. So you were not able to add, 4 family members and suddenly apply for the wage subsidy for everybody.
What about my wife's particular situation? She can't get any staff to work. So, and our daughter's out of school, and our daughter's working full time now, chairside with my wife. Never worked with her before, but that's the only way my wife can work, is as the only employee.
I believe she would be excluded, according to what we have so far.
So it's a prejudice against the fact that it's our daughter working with us. Right. So that's not really fair, because it's legit. Otherwise, my wife would not be able to work.
And that's absolutely true. They're trying to do a lot of things to say, well, we're going to be. They've had some pretty punitive, warnings and things about this, saying, well, if we're going to be, and Bill Morneau has said, just be aware, we're going to be very, we're going to be on top of this. We're going to be making sure, we're going to be double checking. And you're right. She falls absolutely into a gap. If your wife were to have employed my daughter or Chris's daughter, then that would have been fine. But by virtue of the fact that they are connected, it isn't allowed. It's a little bit like the tax proposals around selling your farm to your kids. They'd say, oh, that's a connected person. Sorry. That is kind of the messaging of a lot of this stuff. They basically assume that business owners are not acting in good faith. The first assumption is that they don't act in good faith. And if they get enough pushback, then they'll say, oh, okay, actually, there's probably a situation where we should revise this.
Yeah,
the first position is that.
I was going to suggest, if you think about it, remember the 2017 tax proposals, the original ones that came out, where they had the tax on split income rules, the TOSI rules. Mm-hmm. The assumption was, basically you had to prove that this person your spouse was actually working for you, prove that, and the assumption was you're cheating, is essentially what it was viewed as. It's maybe not a pleasant analogy, but that's the reality, is that the onus is on you to prove it otherwise, and the penalties, it can make it where it's not worth it, not worth taking the risk.
Yeah, but this is legit. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
It is legit. It's just, but remember, it's not your interpretation of it. It's the CRA's interpretation of it. And the CRA doesn't usually come down on the side of being on the taxpayer's side.
Yeah.
It is legit, and this is why where Marc was talking about, definitely speak with your accountants and possibly lawyers about this. Get their opinions on this for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So yeah, and you're right. It is unfair. There's no question. So CERB and SUSE, so the $2,000 a month benefit and the wage subsidy, this is one of the biggest questions we've had, is, okay, well, should I apply for the CERB, or should I wait and use this wage subsidy as with your accountant? And I think it's good advice to say, as the business owner, for the staff, start with CERB. For the business owner, assuming that you have the cash flow, waiting and seeing how the system works out and figuring out once we have clarity, saying, okay, I meet the following criteria. The one positive thing I see here is that the federal government has indicated that they'll have a mechanism to make sure people aren't being paid twice, that they haven't applied for both, but that they're also recognizing the fact that it might be situations, because we didn't have enough information when the CERB was released, to be able to say how the wage subsidy system would work, that they would allow people to, and even employees, to pay back the $2,000 if they qualify for the 847 for the wage subsidy. So this might be something where in the next few months, where there's clarity, like we say, okay, well, we've applied on your behalf, but now we're going to go back and say to the staff, here's an agreement. You're going to have an agreement drafted, and if you decide to do this, to say, well, we would be able to qualify for the 847. I'm going to get full CPP and CPP and EI from the government top up, and we have clarity around it. So the good thing about this is that because this program runs to the end of September, we're actually going to be able to get clarity and then come back and sort of make those decisions once we have some time and some clarity around this, to then come back to the employees and say, okay, so you would qualify under this. We have clarification. I have this legal agreement that you will pay back the CERB, for example, and then we can pay you through this, and we know that we're going to get reimbursed by the government, for example. I've heard anecdotally from some clinic owners that that staff have been contacting them because there has been some stuff floating around the industry saying essentially that you shouldn't be on the $2,000 a month. Your employer will get topped up, and they should be paying you. They should still be continuing with your salary because they're going to get this top up. Clearly, they haven't considered the cash flow impact on a business that has lost 100% of its revenue to continue with full staff salaries. It's completely unrealistic. But if there is a discussion, or if there is pushback on that, this is one of the talking points to say, we're waiting for clarity around this. Once we have clarity, there might be a mechanism where we're able to go back and make use of that system. We simply can't do it yet because we don't really know enough about how it works and how that undoing of it would be put together.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, the biggest thing about all of this stuff is there's a lot of complexity. Taking a little more time, not being right in the beginning of it, and getting 100% feedback from your accountant is going to be really critical.
Yeah. There was one other thing as well that, as it said 15 and 30 and 30. Well, originally it was proposed 30% was a mark you had to hit in March. That got a lot of blowback. People were still working for the first couple of weeks. Our offices were open the first couple of weeks. So they lowered it to 15. But now so you hit that 15% requirement, like the loss of income. But the government has also put in that if you artificially lower your income by actions you took or actions you failed to take. Now, a lot of the actions you failed to take aren't necessarily going to apply to dentists. I know when I go to my dentist, before I walk out the door, he's grabbed me by the ankles and I paid my bill. But with this is that it's supposed if there's other billings, or you arrange things so you could meet under the 15%, and it wasn't because of the business drop off. Just be aware of that. Don't try to monkey around and try to lower your incomes in different ways. Just make sure it's legit 15% drop off, and then you qualify.
Yeah, and I think like Marc said, most dentists, it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, it's not really going to be an issue, but it does pop up. So just be aware, actions taken or inaction, or actions not taken if you try to get your income below the 15%. But yeah, generally speaking, for dentists, it's not going to be a problem.
Don't abuse the program.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense today to take a quick run through. They have been very clear that they've, and it starts from, and in a broader perspective, I think it starts from this refers back for me to the 2017 tax proposals, where there is this underlying assumption that business owners are doing something shady by virtue of the fact of being business owners and being the economic engine of Canada. I don't know how we have the audacity to do that. But it is hard not to feel that when you see how this is sort of structured in the messaging we're hearing. So it just is one of those things where I'd say absolutely, get good advice, but be aware that they're probably going to be looking to make some examples. So penalties for misuse of the program, they could make you repay it. If you've paid this to a third, to not somebody in your family or not to yourself, and you had to pay 75% of the wage back, that would be difficult. Although I really don't see, the clients that I work with operate in good faith, and they're genuinely trying to stay on side with the way the rules are described. Reducing qualifying revenue, Chris was talking about, they will assess a penalty for that. False statement is sort of where it gets into the big penalty. That's a 50% penalty of the amount being claimed, of the inappropriate amount being claimed. That's false statements, but the biggest one comes from attestation. This is actually not something new that they put in, to their credit. This is already existing. Existing legislation that says, well, if you do something in bad faith to try to put this in, and it was really deceptive and improper, it is technically a criminal offense. It's the same as any of your other filings. If they did make an attestation deceptively, you could be looking at a 200% fine and up to 2 years in jail for the attester, for the person who attested. We've heard some feedback from the accounting community where they've said, well, if we're submitting forms and we're attesting to things, is this our personal liability? Is this our corporate liability, malpractice, what have you? Is this something where we could be on the hook for this? And so there have been some questions around that. Again, I don't see the people that we're working with going out of their way to being, you're not really able to hire a bunch of non-qualified people and put them on salary and take money back somehow. But they have had some messaging around this to sort of warn people. And the biggest, and now this sort of ties into what we talked about on the loan side about having being required to have follow-up surveys and things. This is the one that has jumped out from all the accounting firms and everybody.
Hang on, before we get to that point.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Do you have any questions about?
Yeah, before we get to that point, it seems to me pretty clear that you would almost have to know you're offside to be offside. It seems pretty hard, and correct me if I'm wrong, to make an honest mistake where you would be into the attestation zone and false statement zone, because it's pretty clear. And for most parts, dentist claims are pretty legitimate. So yes,
yeah,
if it passes your smell test, chances are you're legit. And I'm correct me wrong, but it doesn't seem too draconian that they'd come after us for perhaps a small misstep.
Not dentists are so detail oriented. I doubt very much that there'd be too many dentists. This is just, we do want to put out there that there are rules.
Yeah.
But we're not worried about dentists in particular for that. It's just be aware of it is really all we're trying to get across.
Yeah. No. It's good. It's good to know, because this might, it's good to get a feel of it. And certainly have a big hammer there if you're pushing the boundaries, but it seems that the rules are relatively clear.
Yeah.
And you would really know if you were doing a misstep.
To be fair to the government as well, they needed to put something out there so that the general public doesn't think this is a free for all for that. So there are penalties. Oh, okay, there's penalties, and okay, and it's easier to sell if people know that there's penalties for abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
certainly wouldn't want to be in that position, but I think you would almost know that you were meant to be there if you were there.
No, I can't imagine dentists would fall under this. No.
And the revenue model is relatively stable.
Mm-hmm.
People come in, you get paid from insurance, you get paid from the person, you hire staff that do the work. And if you had a business, it's maybe a little bit more esoteric. You're importing goods, or when you take revenue and things like that. There are a lot more questions and things that could be up in the air, but most of this is around that qualifying and saying, well, did you do this for the wrong purpose? Did you call it this, or did you withhold a payment, or push something off? It's not a business where you really have an ability to do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, push all your sales to another month.
That being said,
I think you'd have to be trying.
A lot of dentists may have spouses who have their own business that's not dentistry. They may have questions around it. They run their own at-home business, for example, and they want to know. So it's a good thing for everybody to know. Because
absolutely. Because if you read this, you're like, oh gosh, I certainly don't want to be in there. Right?
Yeah.
So it's good to know that. It's not easily to get into that zone, but
get good advice, but don't be. You're right to say don't be dissuaded from applying because you say, well, I don't know, maybe they're going to come after me. It's just too scary. In good faith, there's no reason to think you would be offside.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Sorry, I jumped in there. So
good points. Very
good.
good.
On to that really it's kind of like that other weird one, the survey one, right?
No, I like the survey, and the survey I can kind of see, like maybe that's because they basically have said the reality is so many people applied. There's no way that our auditors could keep up with doing enough audits to really make sure that it was done properly. So
and probably help them also develop a game plan in case we come across COVID 2020 too, right? Yeah. So
for sure.
So I can see information gathering could be useful to the government. But anyway, I'm sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So on this side, this is the one part that I've seen the most questions especially from the accounting community and in the tax planning community and stuff. Where people have said this is unprecedented, and frankly, it's just kind of weird. The minister, this is Bill Morneau. This is a political person, may communicate to the public in any manner that they see fit about any person who's submitted a SUSE application pursuant to a new subsection of the Act. So this isn't like where there was something previously and says, oh, we always have the right to do this. This is something that was new, specifically brought in about the SUSE program, saying the minister may communicate however he feels. We have a couple of questions and they said, well, maybe this is basically a name and shame kind of situation. If somebody's acting inappropriately, the minister would be able to say, well, the following group or company or what have you put in the SUSE application, and we found that was unjustified, and we've dismissed it. Sort of a public naming and shaming. Pretty questionable. Like, you're allowed to do that if you had a court case, if you charge somebody, or there could be criminal violations. If you say, well, there's a criminal violation and somebody or some company has been charged with something, then you're allowed to announce that
after you're found guilty,
or you've been legitimately charged, right? They can say somebody has been legitimately charged with this or that, right?
This is just at his whim, or her
this
whim?
Is if you put the application in, he's allowed to say whatever he wants, or he's allowed to communicate the fact that you put this application in. So they've proactively taken away, sort of the presumed privacy of saying, oh, okay, well, I applied for this, but I didn't, whether you did get it or you didn't get it, or, applications in process. To be frank, we are somewhat concerned about the idea that maybe this could be politicized, where if we get into the next election campaign, somebody is criticizing Bill Morneau and saying, well, you guys, it was such a shambles in how you handled COVID, and yak. And then you get the, but you're from you're a shareholder of a corporation that applied for the SUSE benefit. So how can you criticize us when you also, took the money from us, didn't take it from them, but took it from the taxpayer, but you took the benefits, but you have the audacity to criticize. So it's just a very strange, it's a very strange thing to put in there. Now, you're not running for office or something, maybe it's not as big a concern. But there is sort of a reputational risk there. They say, you know, if you say, well, you know, could there be a wholesale list saying the following corporations have applied for the Misuse benefit, or even this could be a, you know, sort of a patting yourself on the back kind of thing, where they say all of these corporations were provided benefits under our, you know, and essentially marketing, using your name to market their political activities. So it honestly just makes me feel fairly uncomfortable. It's not something that it doesn't seem like something you would see in legislation normally.
Yeah, I don't think it should dissuade us peon small dentists from applying, but it does kind of make you think that politics is creeping into a program that you know, really, if we're to take the high road, it shouldn't. You know, if you're misbehaving, you're misbehaving. They got the penalties for that. And you know what? If we're going to throw political swords at each other, then that's fine. But yeah, it's kind of like they've left a little bit of a door open, like, oh, if we want to play politics, then we can dig up the dirt on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but Ottawa's a political beast, and yeah, it's a bit of a shame. But I would strongly suggest, even if some dentists are considering running for office, you know, you got to take the benefits that you can. You got to keep your head above water, and if they throw this dirt at you, yeah, anyway, we don't know. But it seems weird that politics, that seems like a political creep into you know, what should really be an altruistic program, and they already have penalties, and it's just an additional penalty, or something odd. Yeah. But and it's weird too. We have a minority government, and this hasn't been brought up.
But they may honestly be wanting this for something if there is some abuse, and these are people we caught and we can prove the system worked. It may be also they're setting themselves up for protection down the road. If people say this program wasn't well done, it was extravagant, it's not just about directly silencing the people who may have a criticism, but it could also just simply be for Parliament to say we did this and we stopped these people, or whatever it might be. It might just simply. I mean, unfortunately,
we really don't know. We're speculating, eh?
Pardon me?
We really don't know. We're speculating, but there could be a good side to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was part of the negotiations for this, right? This took some time to pass. It might be that they accepted this because it got rid of two more egregious things. Who knows?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, but yeah, it is quite unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. It is a bit of a head scratcher.
Okay. All right. So, any more on the Misuse?
I think that really covers it. I mean, to my mind, in general, my back of the envelope is if you're a clinic owner, staff are on get the $2,000 a month. Maybe we can revise it. We can always say we're having this assessed. Once we have clarity, then we might be able to do something. I think you're handling it just right for yourself. And then if you do qualify for it as an individual, an incorporated dentist, for example, to my mind, it makes sense to apply. Without staff, it takes away a lot of the complication. The revenue has generally gone to zero. So there is some simplicity around that. Unfortunately, it's devastating from a business perspective.
Okay. And if you're basically an associate dentist, this isn't for you? It
could be. It could be because a lot of the associate dentists that I have, my feeling in general is, most dentists that I work with need about $10,000 a month. You've put yourself on a payroll. We usually target somewhere between $60,000 and $96,000 a year of T4 income, and then you took a little more out for dividends. Well, there's no reason not to, with the approval of your accountant, say, okay, yeah, you made all the criteria. Your income went to zero because your clinic closed. That would work for this.
Okay.
But you do need to be.
I'm sorry. I meant SEBA. If you're an associate, wouldn't qualify. I mean, sorry, the $10,000, $40,000 loan because you're not.
If you qualify, sure. Yeah.
But most associates just a broad reach statement. Most associates would with the 40,000, I know we're talking about another thing, with the 40,000 not necessarily be something that they would qualify for if you're an associate. You're not an owner. You go in, you do your crowns and bridges and fillings, and then you leave and you get a percentage of your production. That 40,000, would you see the average?
You could, yeah. I have a few that have applied for it. It's, you know, if you have paid yourself with, you know, you have paid T4 and T5. I mean, some only pay themselves dividends, but where they've paid a salary and they are incorporated, and they were incorporated long enough that they can show previous income either last year or this year.
For the $40,000 loan.
Oh, sorry, for the 40,000. Yeah.
Really? Because
as long as they had
you would imagine that the practice owner of, you know, Broadreach Dental, so the owner of that clinic would go for the $40,000 loan, right? The principal. Then an associate's working at Broadreach, and all the associate does is dentistry. They're an independent contractor. Do they qualify for that 40,000?
Some do. So if they're an incorporated, so you're a sole proprietor, like, you know, you're essentially.
Yeah, I got that. You're incorporated. Yeah.
You're incorporated. You did pay yourself a salary from your own corporation. I have a number of clients who do that. They're just an associate. I mean, they're an associate, and they get paid through. They get paid from their company, so they keep some money in retainer earnings at their corporate level. They have some personally, and they chose to pay some CPP and take T4 income or salaried income. Mm-hmm. Then they can apply. I have a number.
Because that 40,000 was for specific costs that you can't defer, and as an associate,
salary.
Okay.
Right. So the salary was fine for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dividend you can defer. Salary is monthly, so that's a non-deferrable expense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and in general, we've been saying, like, you know, try to be careful about that. So pay your salary as normal. Pay your, use the 40,000 for paying your salary, pay your licensing costs, you know, those things, but don't pay, let's say, don't pay anything you could defer or anything, let's say your personal insurance that you own corporately. You said, well, you could make an argument about that, and the salary is going to eat that up in any case. That's normally, the salaries are either usually in my case, 5,000 or 8,000 a month of T4. So, okay, we said that's flowing to that. If you have to pay any extra for dividends, make sure that's you know, kept separate. That you can show that 40,000 got used up for the purpose that was intended.
Okay.
And I also want to jump in with a CERB for one more group, the 2,000 month benefit. We get questions from student dentists as well as just recently graduated. And they're wondering, hey, is there anything for us? Unfortunately, not a lot. You'd still have to meet the requirement of earning 5,000 for the previous year. So maybe if you worked as a waiter or waitress, maybe you're in the summertime, I don't know. A lot of dentists simply just are living on their Canada student loans and their lines of credit at the banks, so they wouldn't qualify. So just, I mean, the debts have been, there's a 6-month moratorium on the Canada student loans. Again, go to our website if you want to read what the deferments are. We haven't had anything officially from the banks on their student lines of credit. As far as you know, those are still operating as normal. You got to at least pay the minimum interest. Maybe you can speak with your bank about that, but that'll be on a one-on-one basis. It wouldn't be as a blanket. So just, unfortunately for student dentists, those who have just graduated, it's not likely you're going to, and you don't have a job yet, you're probably out of luck for now.
Okay. We're down to like a minute now. Love the free Zoom, but okay. This super quick. It's probably a no. If you were a dentist and you worked in 3 offices, that 40,000 would just be for you, not, you couldn't do 3 separate applications.
Yeah. Ooh, that'd be nice.
Wouldn't it? Oh, crush my dream. Okay. Well, guys, this is absolutely super fun. Sorry?
The dentist works for his corporation. The corporation is earning it from 3 different clinics.
Yeah.
So it's going 1, 2, 3, 1 down to him.
It's funny you mentioned 1, 2, 3, but never mind.
A little bit of subliminal advertising there.
All right. So this is absolutely wonderful. The seconds are ticking off. We'll add the articles. I'm
Wonderful.
sure this is going to stimulate some responses. You guys have been super fantastic.
If you have any questions, you can reach out to Marc or I. We'll be very happy. We don't take a solicitation for meetings. So if you have questions, fire us an email, contact us. We'll be happy to have an online meeting, emails, phone calls, whatever it is. Very happy to help you out.
All right. That's been absolutely wonderful, guys.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
Thank you.
much.
Yeah.
Have a great Sunday.
Yeah.
Bye.